Capricorn, pause. If you found this message tonight, it's not random. Something is shifting beneath the surface of your life. Quiet, precise, unavoidable. In the next 48 hours, destiny doesn't rush you, but it does begin to move. You may feel it before you see it. A signal, a pause in time. A moment where your intuition says, pay attention. This is not about fear, and it's not about hype. This is about alignment, about what was delayed, finally catching up to you. Before we go deeper, I want you to anchor this energy. Type in the comments, I am ready to receive what's moving toward me. That single sentence opens the door. Now, take a breath, because what comes next explains why these 48 hours matter more than you think. Capricorn, let me stay with you here for a moment, not rushing, not pushing, just sitting beside you, the way a real conversation happens late at night, when the world finally goes quiet. You didn't come across this by accident. I know that sounds like something people say, but this feels different, doesn't it? There's a subtle pressure in the air around you right now. Not heavy, not threatening, just present. Like the moment before the weather changes, when the sky hasn't moved yet, but your body knows it's coming. That's what's happening in your life. Something underneath the surface has begun to shift, slowly, deliberately, in the way only real change does. You've lived long enough to know that the most important moments don't arrive with noise. They arrive quietly, almost politely. Over the next 48 hours, you may notice small things trying to get your attention. A sentence you overhear that stays with you longer than it should. A piece of information that lands differently this time. A pause in your routine where you suddenly feel, I should pay attention right now. And when that happens, don't brush it off. Not because it's dramatic, but because your intuition has finally been given space to speak. You've spent a long time being the strong one, the steady one, the one who holds things together while others fall apart. You don't panic, you endure, you calculate, you carry responsibility quietly. But endurance has a cost, and sometimes, Capricorn, life waits until you're strong enough before it begins to give back. That's the energy surrounding you now. Not chaos, not upheaval, but correction. A gentle recalibration. You may find yourself remembering moments when things didn't move forward even though you did everything right. Times when progress stalled without explanation. When recognition arrived late, or not at all. That wasn't because you missed something. And it wasn't because you weren't ready. It was timing. And timing is shifting. You might feel it as a quiet clarity. A sense that you're standing at the edge of something new, without needing to name it yet. That feeling isn't asking you to act. It's asking you to notice. Notice how your body responds. Notice what suddenly feels lighter. Notice what no longer deserves your energy. These are the first signs, and they matter more than big announcements ever could. Because once destiny begins to move, it doesn't shout, it rearranges. And if you stay present, you'll start to see why certain delays existed, why certain doors stayed closed, and why now feels different. Take another breath with me. You don't need answers yet. You don't need a plan. Just awareness. Because what's unfolding next isn't about chance. It's about alignment. And once that alignment locks in, things that felt frozen begin to respond to you again. Let's stay right here for a moment longer. Because there's more being revealed, and it arrives in a way only someone like you would recognize. Capricorn, I want you to hear this the way it was meant to be heard, not like a warning, but like a quiet knock on the inside of your life. Because you do not shift just because you feel emotional, you shift when something in you becomes undeniably ready, when timing finally ripens, when the universe stops whispering and starts placing the truth right in your path. These next 48 hours feel like a seam, like the exact line where the old fabric ends and the new one begins, and you can sense it before you can explain it. Maybe you have been waking up with that strange heaviness, not sadness, just weight. The kind of weight you get when you have been carrying the same story for too long, the same responsibility, the same expectation to stay strong, to stay composed, to stay productive, even when your spirit has been quietly asking for something softer. Capricorn, what if this is not your breaking point? What if it is your turning point? Because I need you to notice something. When you are about to outgrow an old cycle, life starts to feel slightly uncomfortable in a very specific way. Not chaotic, not dramatic, just off, like the same routines do not fit the same way anymore, like the same conversations drain you faster, like the same compromises taste bitter in your mouth. And you might be telling yourself, I am fine, I am handling it, I am pushing through. But your soul is saying something else. Your soul is saying, I cannot keep living like this. Not this version of my life, not this version of me. You are not being asked to make a huge move, not tonight, not right now. You are being asked to observe, to stay awake inside your own mind, to watch how the world responds when you stop forcing what is already expired. And in these 48 hours, there is going to be a moment, small, almost easy to miss, where you feel the door click. A cycle closing is rarely loud. It is usually silent. It looks like a decision you finally stopped debating. It looks like an old fear losing its grip. It looks like you choosing your peace without needing permission. Let me ask you this. Have you been holding on to something simply because it used to be familiar, even though it no longer feels like home? You do not need to punish yourself for that. You survived by being steady. You protected your life by being disciplined. That is how you love. That is how you endure. But endurance is not the same as destiny, and destiny does not demand you suffer to prove you are worthy. Destiny invites you to align, to listen, to stop arguing with the signs. So, if this is landing in your chest right now, I want you to claim it gently, in a way that feels true to you. Type this in the comments, I am ready to see the sign. Not because you need to convince the universe, but because you are choosing to be present, choosing to notice, choosing to receive. And once you do, watch what happens. Because the moment you stop treating your life like something you must only manage, you start experiencing it like something that is finally moving with you. Keep your eyes open, not in fear, in clarity. Because the first confirmation usually arrives in the simplest form, and it always finds you when you are quiet enough to recognize it. Capricorn, let me speak to you gently here. Not about effort, not about pushing harder, but about something quietly returning to you. There has been a pause in your life that never quite made sense. A stretch of time where you showed up fully, did the right thing, kept your word, and still watched the reward arrive late. Or not arrive at all. You questioned yourself more than you should have. Wondered if you missed a step, if you waited too long, if you asked for too much by simply expecting fairness. But listen closely now. What was delayed was not denied. It was held. Held until you were strong enough to receive it without losing yourself. Held until your value became unshakable inside you. I want you to think back to moments where something slipped through your hands. Not because you were careless, but because someone else hesitated, redirected, or took credit for what you built quietly. That kind of delay leaves a mark. It teaches you to expect less, to stay guarded, to accept the bare minimum and call it stability. But something is loosening now. You may feel it as a subtle easing in your chest, a sense that the pressure is lifting, that the constant need to prove yourself is fading. And in the next couple of days, life may place something familiar back in your path, a conversation that circles back, an opportunity that reappears with a different tone, a number, a message, a moment that makes you stop and think, I thought this was over. This is not coincidence, this is correction. Because when balance begins to restore itself, it rarely announces its arrival. It simply starts responding to you again. You might notice that what comes back feels calmer, more respectful, less desperate, less rushed. That is how you know it is meant to stay. Capricorn, you were never asking for more than you deserved. You were asking for alignment. And alignment does not arrive as luck. It arrives as recognition. Recognition of your patience, your discipline, your quiet loyalty to what mattered. You carried responsibility that was not always yours. You stayed longer than you should have. You held space for people who were not ready to meet you there. That takes strength, but it also creates imbalance. Now the scales are shifting, not dramatically, not suddenly, but steadily. You may be tempted to downplay what shows up, to say it is not a big deal, to stay modest, to stay cautious. But I want you to let yourself acknowledge it, even silently, even just within your own breath. Say to yourself, I am allowed to receive this. There is dignity in acceptance. There is healing in allowing life to respond to you with fairness. And here is something important. What returns to you now is not fragile. It does not require you to overextend. It does not ask you to sacrifice peace for security. It meets you where you are. That is the difference. You have grown into someone who understands value beyond survival. Someone who knows that stability should not cost your soul. As this realization settles in, you may feel a quiet confidence rising. Not loud, not performative, just grounded. The kind of confidence that says, I know who I am, and I know what I am worth. Stay with that feeling, because once you recognize it, life has a way of answering in kind. And as you hold that awareness, notice how the atmosphere around you continues to change. Subtle, precise, intentional. There is more unfolding here. And it arrives naturally, the way truth always does, when you are finally ready to see it. Capricorn, stay with me right here. There is something important I want you to understand, and it does not require you to fight for it. You do not need to reclaim anything with force. You do not need to explain yourself again. You do not need to prove your worth to anyone who chose not to see it. For a long time, you carried the quiet weight of being underestimated. People looked past your consistency, your patience, your integrity. Some benefited from your silence. Some stood in your way without ever saying your name out loud. Some assumed you would keep going without ever asking what it cost you. And you did, because that is who you are. But something is changing now, and it has nothing to do with confrontation. This is not about revenge. It is not about winning an argument. It is not about making anyone regret what they did. This is about balance returning to its natural state. Justice does not always arrive in courtrooms or conversations. Sometimes it arrives quietly, by removing what no longer belongs, by shifting circumstances just enough that people are forced to sit with the results of their own choices. You may never hear an apology. You may never get an explanation, and that is not a loss, because accountability does not need your participation to be real. The people who dismissed you are beginning to face the limits of their own actions. The doors that opened easily for them start to resist. The support they took for granted becomes uncertain, not as punishment, as consequence. And you are not meant to watch closely. You are not meant to wait for proof. You are not meant to feel satisfied by their struggle. Your role is simpler and far more powerful. You keep walking. There is a quiet dignity in choosing forward motion without dragging the past behind you, in allowing life to resolve what you no longer need to carry. Capricorn, you have spent enough time holding yourself together while others avoided responsibility. You have done enough emotional labor without recognition. Now your strength shows up differently, as calm, as restraint, as the ability to let go without losing your sense of self. This is the kind of justice that restores energy, not by taking something from someone else, but by giving you your peace back. You may notice that certain connections begin to fade naturally, not through conflict, through distance, through silence, through a mutual understanding that something has run its course. And in that space, something lighter enters. Relief, clarity, a sense that you are no longer being tested. Ask yourself this quietly. When was the last time you felt this steady without bracing for impact? That steadiness is not accidental. It is earned. You have reached a point where life no longer needs you to suffer in order to grow, where fairness does not require your exhaustion. This is what happens when the scales begin to adjust on their own. You feel less reactive, less defensive, less pulled into old narratives. And as you continue forward, without explanation, without resentment, without needing validation, you create space for something better to recognize you. Because the world responds differently to someone who knows when to stop carrying what was never theirs. Take a breath here. Notice how much lighter it feels to simply keep moving, to trust that what is no longer aligned will resolve itself. There is a calm intelligence in this moment, a quiet power, and as you hold that calm, as you allow justice to do its work without interference, you may start to sense something approaching. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. A sign, a message, a small confirmation that tells you everything is unfolding exactly as it should. Stay open, not alert, open. Because when fairness restores itself, it often sends a signal ahead, just gentle enough for someone like you to recognize it without effort. Capricorn, let me lean a little closer here, because what I'm about to say is subtle, and it only lands when you're listening with more than your ears. The first sign does not announce itself. It doesn't arrive with noise or urgency. It doesn't demand your attention. It simply appears. And the reason it feels so clear is because it meets you at the exact moment. You've stopped forcing answers. You might be doing something ordinary, driving, sitting alone with a cup of coffee, scrolling without really seeing the screen. And then it happens. A message comes through. A name you hadn't thought about in a while. A line in an email that feels heavier than the rest. A sentence someone says casually without knowing it lands directly in your chest. And you pause. Not because you're confused, but because something inside you clicks into place. You don't panic. You don't rush to respond. You just feel that quiet recognition. Oh. So this is how it starts. That moment matters more than you realize. Because Capricorn, you are not someone who reacts easily. You don't jump at signs. You don't chase every coincidence. So when something stops you in your tracks, even gently, it's because your intuition has already done the math. This first signal is not meant to change your life instantly. It's meant to orient you, like a compass needle settling, like fog thinning just enough for you to see the outline of what's ahead. You might feel a calm certainty wash over you, not excitement, not anxiety, certainty. And that's how you know it's real, because truth doesn't rush you, it steadies you. You may even find yourself smiling quietly, almost to yourself, thinking I knew this was coming, not in detail, not in form, but in feeling. This is the universe speaking your language, clear, direct, unemotional in the best way. It doesn't overwhelm you, it respects your pace. And here's something important. The sign doesn't come to impress you, it comes to confirm what you already sensed, that something has begun moving again, that the stillness you were in was not stagnation, it was preparation. You were being repositioned, quietly, patiently. So, when this signal arrives, don't overthink it. You don't need to analyze every possibility. You don't need to predict the outcome. Just acknowledge it, even if you say nothing out loud, even if you simply breathe a little deeper. That acknowledgement is enough. It tells life, I see you responding now. And life responds back by continuing to unfold. You may notice after this moment that things feel slightly easier. Conversations flow with less resistance. Timing feels more cooperative, not perfect, but responsive. That's the shift. And it happens faster than most people expect, because once movement begins, it doesn't stop to explain itself. Capricorn, you've lived through enough delays to recognize when momentum is finally real. Trust that instinct. Trust the quiet yes you feel in your body. The sense of alignment that doesn't need applause. Stay open, not alert. Open. Because this first sign is not the destination. It's the invitation. And as you carry that awareness forward, without urgency, without doubt, you may start to notice how the atmosphere around you continues to shift. Subtle adjustments. New responses. A feeling that something unseen is arranging itself in your favor. Let that awareness settle, because when the first signal arrives, it's never alone. It's simply the beginning of a conversation that unfolds naturally as long as you keep listening the way you are right now. Capricorn, let your shoulders drop for a moment. Not because everything is solved, not because life suddenly became easy, but because something inside you is no longer bracing for impact. You've lived a long time in tension, not loud tension, quiet tension, the kind that sits behind your eyes, in your jaw, in the way you keep moving even when you're tired. You learned early how to hold yourself together, how to stay functional, how to stay responsible. And you did it so well that no one ever questioned the cost. But right now, there is a softening happening inside you, not weakness, release. You might notice it in small ways. You breathe a little deeper without trying. You sleep a little heavier when night finally comes. Your thoughts stop racing the moment you lie down. For once, your mind doesn't need to solve tomorrow before midnight. And that matters more than you think. Because when your nervous system begins to settle, it's a sign that you are no longer in survival mode. You've been living like every step had to be calculated. Every choice had to be justified. Every pause had to be earned. But now, you don't feel the same urgency to prove yourself. You don't feel pulled into unnecessary arguments. You don't feel the need to explain your boundaries. You don't feel responsible for managing everyone else's expectations. That quiet relief is not accidental. It means your inner position has shifted. You are no longer standing in defense. You are standing in alignment. And alignment feels calm, not euphoric, not dramatic, just steady. You may find yourself responding slower, choosing words more carefully, letting silence do some of the work for you. That's wisdom settling in. Capricorn, this is what it feels like to return to yourself. Not the version of you that was shaped by pressure, but the one that exists beneath all that effort, the one who knows their value without rehearsing it, There is a gentleness in you right now that you haven't allowed in a long time. Not softness that makes you vulnerable to harm, softness that makes you human again. And that gentleness is not slowing you down, it's sharpening your clarity. You can think more clearly now because you're not fighting your own instincts. You can see situations as they are without needing to brace for disappointment. That's a powerful place to stand. Ask yourself quietly, when was the last time you felt this grounded without feeling guarded? That answer matters, because peace doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in these small internal shifts, moments where your body finally believes you're safe enough to exhale. This is how healing actually begins, not with grand declarations, but with the absence of constant strain. And from this place, your decisions change, not because you force them to, but because they naturally align with what feels right instead of what feels expected. You don't chase validation anymore. You don't negotiate your worth. You don't hold space for what drains you. You simply notice what nourishes you. And as this inner calm continues to settle, something else becomes possible. You start to build again, not from pressure, not from fear, but from stability. That's where your real strength lives. So stay with this feeling, let it deepen. Let it teach you that ease does not mean loss of control, it means trust. And when trust replaces tension, life begins to respond differently to you, quietly, consistently, with opportunities that don't require you to sacrifice your peace. Notice how this calm prepares you, not for struggle, but for something more solid, something that meets you where you are now. Because when you return to your center, the world has a way of meeting you there too. Capricorn, stay with me a little longer, because this part feels different, not louder, not faster, heavier in the best way. There is a sense of ground beneath your feet now, not imagined, not hopeful, real. You've spent so much of your life walking on uncertain terrain, learning how to balance without leaning too hard on anything, keeping your weight centered because you knew the surface could shift. That taught you discipline, it taught you restraint, it taught you how to survive storms without collapsing. But survival was never meant to be the final destination. What's forming around you now has structure. You can feel it in the way your body responds, in the way your thoughts slow down instead of racing ahead. This does not feel fragile. It doesn't feel like something you have to protect from every angle. It doesn't ask you to constantly check for cracks. It feels solid, and that's important for someone like you, because you don't trust what can't hold weight. You don't invest in what doesn't last. You don't build your life on promises that dissolve under pressure. So, when something arrives with stability woven into it, your nervous system recognizes it before your mind does. You relax without needing proof. You lean in without fear. This could show up in different ways. A financial situation that finally makes sense long term. A professional path that no longer feels temporary. A relationship where you don't feel like you're carrying the entire structure alone. But the common thread is this. For the first time in a while, you can imagine adding to your life without worrying about everything falling apart. You can picture growth, expansion, roots going deeper instead of spreading thinner. And that thought doesn't exhaust you, it steadies you. Capricorn, this is the moment you've been waiting for without naming it. Not excitement, not chaos, not constant motion, reliability. The kind that lets you breathe while you build. The kind that supports your ambition instead of competing with it. You don't need to rush this. You don't need to rush anything anymore. What's meant for you now isn't running away. It's meeting you at your pace. There is dignity in slow construction. There is power in foundations that don't need applause. You've always understood that, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. Ask yourself quietly, when was the last time you felt this sure without feeling pressured to move faster? That certainty is not accidental. It's the result of every lesson you've integrated, every boundary you learned to hold, every time you chose long-term integrity over short-term relief. And now, life responds with something that can actually hold what you give it. This stability isn't asking you to shrink. It's inviting you to build bigger without sacrificing your peace. That's the difference. You're no longer choosing between success and sanity, between responsibility and rest. You're learning that they can coexist. As this awareness settles in, you may feel a quiet motivation returning, not the anxious kind, the grounded kind, the kind that says, I can take my time here, I can do this right. And from that place, your next steps become clearer. Not because you force them into focus, but because the path beneath you stops shifting. Stay present with that feeling, because when stability begins to form, It doesn't just support what you're building, it prepares you for something deeper, something that doesn't just last, but belongs. And as you continue forward, with this steadiness beneath you, you may start to sense a quiet realization rising, a knowing that what's unfolding now is not just something you can build, it's something you can finally live inside. Capricorn, this is the part where nothing explodes, nothing announces itself, nothing asks for applause, and yet, everything begins to change. You don't need a celebration to mark this moment. You don't need a finish line. You don't need proof from the outside world. You only need to notice. Notice how the pressure you carried for so long no longer sits in the same place. Notice how your decisions feel quieter, more deliberate, less reactive. That's how a real shift starts. Not with fireworks, with relief. The days following this point don't feel rushed. They feel steady. Like time is finally working with you instead of against you. You may wake up one morning and realize you're no longer bracing yourself for what might go wrong. You're simply present with what is, and that presence changes everything. Because from here on, what enters your life doesn't arrive to test you. It arrives to continue something that has already begun. Momentum builds slowly now, naturally. Opportunities don't vanish overnight. They grow, they develop, they reveal layers instead of demands. You begin to see how one decision leads gently into another, how one moment of clarity opens space for the next, how what once felt blocked now responds to you with patience. This is not about sudden luck. It's about alignment settling in. You don't have to fight for every inch anymore. You don't have to defend your worth. You don't have to convince life that you're ready. Life already knows, and that knowing shows up as continuity. Things keep moving forward without you having to push. Conversations evolve, plans gain traction, relationships find their natural rhythm. Not perfect, but real. Capricorn, you've lived long enough to recognize when something isn't temporary. This doesn't feel like a phase. It feels like a foundation expanding. Less struggle, more return, less second guessing, more trust in your own timing. And that trust doesn't make you complacent. It makes you precise. You choose better now, not faster, better. You say no without guilt, yes without hesitation, and silence becomes a tool instead of a threat. There is a quiet confidence in you that doesn't need to be named. It shows in how you move, how you listen, how you allow things to unfold without interference. This is what a new era actually feels like. Not louder, wiser, not chaotic, intentional. You are no longer measuring your life by how much you can endure. You're measuring it by how much you can sustain. That shift alone changes the trajectory of everything you touch. As this settles, you may notice a deeper sense of belonging in your own life. Like you're finally standing in a space that fits you, a space you don't have to outgrow. That's when you know you're where you're meant to be. And there's no rush from here. What continues after this point has room to breathe, room to expand, room to evolve with you. So take this moment in quietly. No announcement, no declaration, just recognition. Because Capricorn, destiny never hurries you, but when it moves with purpose. And now that it's in motion, you don't need to chase it. You only need to keep showing up exactly as you are. Capricorn, before we close this moment, stay with me just a little longer, because endings, when they're real, never feel abrupt. They feel complete. If you're still here listening, it's because something in this message met you honestly. Not as a prediction, not as a promise, but as a reminder of who you already are when you stop carrying what was never meant to be yours. You didn't come here to be told what to do. You came here to remember what you already knew deep down, even during the quiet moments when doubt tried to speak louder than truth. And if this message settled into you, even softly, I want you to anchor it, not for the algorithm, for yourself. In the comments, write this one sentence: I trust myself as I move forward. That simple act connects you to every other Capricorn who is choosing steadiness over struggle, clarity over noise, and long-term truth over short-term fear. If this space feels like home, subscribe. Not as a habit, but as a commitment to staying present for the messages that meet you where you are. Because this isn't a one-time moment, it's a rhythm. And what's unfolding in your life now is not finished speaking. There are signs still aligning, realizations still forming, and a deeper understanding of your path that will arrive exactly when you're ready to hear it. So, don't rush yourself tonight. Let this settle. Let it breathe. The journey doesn't end here. It simply keeps moving, with more clarity, more trust, and less resistance. The next message is already on its way. Until then, take care of your energy. Stay grounded in your truth. And remember this, Capricorn, you don't need to chase destiny. When you're aligned, it always knows how to find you.